delivering clear, concise, and entertaining content on demand. This is sharpertalkmedia.com. Join the community. Welcome to Higher Up, the podcast designed to help you take your business to a higher level.
Get the latest news and updates on everything human resources.
Unlock the occupational DNA so you can identify, select, develop, and retain top talent.
And now your host, John Beck.
Kelly Foray-Richard and Jeremy Broussard, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, John. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Enjoy it.
On track and moving forward here at Sharper Talk Studios, and we are in a groundbreaking podcast episode today. It's the first time we have a dual interview group in the studio, and we're really excited to have you both today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good drive in from Lafayette, Louisiana.
Love it. It's so scenic. A lot of people don't realize the difference in geography across this state and how much it varies. You know, the piney hills in North Louisiana, and then you drive across the swamp from Lafayette to Baton Rouge, and then you get along the river road, and they have all those beautiful live oaks and moss and the plantations. You can't beat it. It's really a beautiful drive.
Jeremy, so descriptive. It makes me want to get in my car and drive down the river road. And I tell you folks, if you haven't been in southern Louisiana and have driven down the river road, you're missing out. Beautiful scenery. You guys, we gave a good intro of who you are, but let's just talk a little more in detail. So K&J, that's obvious. Kelly and Jeremy. K&J Resources, I need to know more. What is it that you guys do?
KJ Resources, we like to call ourselves a culture company. We're an organization that helps build culture both internally and externally with organizations.
When we talk about internally, right, how does what you guys do in the way of business and organizations affect their operations internally? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, with the rise of the millennial buying power, we are experiencing a shift in the way businesses operate, both internally and externally.
Right.
And our theory is that in the next 15 to 20 years, we will not be able to tell the difference between economy and culture in this country, and we won't talk about them separately either.
For everyone listening, give me an example of that. How does that play out? What are we talking about?
In Lafayette on Jefferson Street, there's a coffee shop by the name of Rev Roasters. The baristas that work there, it's not just a job for them, it's a career for them. It's their art. They roast the beans there. They're very engaged and involved in the process. Many of them have been to some type of schooling where they've learned to make coffee art. It's a very educated process for them.
Right.
And so in the past where we've just had someone serving us coffee, and we're shifting to this experience where you go into this coffee shop and you're learning about the different blends and the taste and the palate. You can't help but just want to go there and buy coffee and have this experience, even if you have an office. And so we're going to see this experience when we buy things be just as important as product quality.
So the economics are still there, right?
Right.
So, but the economics have been paired with culture. So for that internal organization, the culture is the passion of the baristas, and it's authentic. You can't make this up because customers know the difference. And then externally, as consumers, we buy into that culture because we want that experience. So they're two different cultures, and they're merging together.
Okay.
But they have to be authentic cultures. So internally, that barista said, I want this to be my career and my art.
Right.
And then externally, we all as consumers are beginning to say, wait, I don't want just a cup of coffee. I want an experience.
So another example.
Kelly gives that sample, right? Everyone can relate to buying a cup of coffee versus a coffee shop that's an experience.
Right.
Now, and another larger example that almost everyone can relate to now is the rise of Uber. They took what was just a normal service that we called taxi service.
Right.
And they created a culture. There's a culture around Uber drivers. Kelly, you have an example.
Absolutely. My mom has a friend whose son is an Uber driver. He talks about when he picks people up at the airport, he always has a bucket of fresh roses and an ice chest in his trunk.
Wow.
For water or beer or whatever it is that the person would desire if they got off of a plane. So it's not just jumping in the car and getting to your next destination. It's the woman who gets that fresh rose and a bottle of water after a rough trip.
Well, I bet his rating's going through the roof.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to need his name next time I'm in Lafayette, because actually I've Ubered in Lafayette, believe it or not. And you know what? I'm going to say, and I'm not sure, but his last name could have been a Broussard. And you know what he did? He told me all about the history of the area that we were in, and he went all the way into the Acadians. And even though I'm from Louisiana, and I told him that, but he educated me, and it was an experience. And look, we were only talking about a 10-minute Uber, you know.
Right.
But you're right. What a cultural difference in the two.
Yeah, and they built a culture. It's not just a service; it's an experience, and we're willing to pay a little more, even if it costs, you know, somewhat reasonably more amount. We'll get a better experience. You get a better ride. You get a more comfortable ride. But anyone who's used Uber can relate to that fact that that's the difference between a taxi service and Uber is the culture behind that movement.
We're talking about cultural changes in organizations, going from a job to passion, right? Because when you're passionate about something you do, it's not a job.
Right. So millennials believe that they want to love what they do and they want to do what they love.
Right.
That is very, very important to them. They're really about integration of themselves into their jobs. And so the way we manage people in our organizations is going to have to change, because what's happening now is, and I'll use an example. My brother has a friend who graduated from law school a few years ago. He went to work at this law firm that was run by baby boomers. He spent 1 month there and decided that just didn't work with his lifestyle.
Right.
So he started his own law firm on his couch, woke up at noon, did his law stuff, went and exercised, did more law stuff, went out, came home, did more law stuff, and next thing you know, he's a very successful attorney in town. So millennials are saying, you know what? If you don't provide a good workplace for me, I'm going to go and do it another way, and it's a way that works for me.
It's breaking the traditional standards and rules. I mean, the rule is when I was growing up, it's 9 to 5 or it's 8 to 5 or whatever the case was. And now what I'm seeing is, and what you're referring to with the attorney, people are setting their own rules. They're making up the rules that are right for them within their job or their passion, right? Is that what we're needing to do with this millennial group?
That is correct. And we're shifting from, instead of giving people bosses, we need to give them leaders. And instead of giving people titles, we need to talk about project roles.
Right.
And we need to match, the leadership needs to help match people's passion with organizational purpose. We also see a movement of people using project teams versus that job thing or that title thing we talked about.
Right.
And there's more accountability on the end or the final product that way. And it also allows people to be versatile, to change and evolve and grow within organizations without being fenced or boxed in.
I'm all about the boss to leader conversion for organizations. People work for a boss, they work for a boss, but they will engage and follow and commit to leaders. It's all about, leadership development and making that transition within organizations. And you still hear there are a lot of organizations out there that have the boss mentality.
They do.
And you can feel it when you walk into the lobbies, right? You walk into a lobby of an organization like that, and you can almost feel it wheezing. That, and we're talking about the culture you guys are referring to, and you can just feel something uniquely different about that experience.
That's right. And I think what we're seeing now is this movement into this insurgence of the creative class into our organizations. And job seekers right now, they're foregoing the big salaries, and the big house and the expensive cars for something that is more aligned with who they are and more integrated with who they are. And so some of the things that we're doing a little bit differently in some of the organizations that we're working in is, instead of giving a policy manual on the first day in an orientation, maybe it's a funny YouTube video with a vacation policy with a jingle and some people dressed up in a goofy costume. Or maybe it's a cartoon or something that describes a process for something versus a boring process. So we're getting people more engaged in how organizations work.
When you think about human resources, I have to say, and I've said this throughout my 25-year career in the human resource industry, I've said to people when they say, well, John, what do you do? I said, well, it's not sexy. When you're dealing with traditional, and I mean traditional HR, and I don't want to stereotype anyone, that typical HR vision that you see of this person in an office doing what they do, it's a real traditional looking role, okay? And the first time I met you, and one of the reasons you're sitting in the studio today is because you were different and unexpected. It was refreshing, and you had this vibe, I guess you would say, and I think I've seen it in some of your materials. I call it, and I mentioned it to my staff when I got back, the first thing I said was, I said, this Kelly lady is making HR cool. Cool. And you call it what?
Punk rock HR.
Punk rock HR. Folks, you've heard it here first on Higher Up. We're going to be looking for that book on
Punk rock HR.
It's in the works, actually.
Yeah, it's in the works. So there you go. Punk rock HR. I can't wait to get it. I want to have the first signed copy. And we'll push it out on Higher Up when we get ready to do that product launch, that book launch, right? When we're talking about making it fun and relating to this new group, the traditional methods of connecting to these people, really you have to toss that out the window because that's just not working. It's not effective.
That's correct. You are seeing dress codes relax a lot these days, more than ever. Even banks relaxing that business dress into something that's a little bit more fitting and enjoyable for people. We're also seeing, we met with a friend recently who works in the banking industry, and he talked a lot about combining and merging the human resources department and the marketing department to have that more cohesive vision of that external and internal way of doing business. And I think that's what's so beautiful about Jeremy and I's working relationship.
I was going to say, it reminds me of a firm that I just got familiar with, right?
It validated what we do. And I think this
it really did.
Yeah.
Is a perfect time for us to talk about how the external buying power of the millennials impact the internal, because I think that's what Jeremy has a good feel for in terms of what he does.
Yeah, so we can go right into that. We covered some internal processes for reaching out to this group, right? The new generation of our workers. How does this affect the way businesses operate and show up externally?
I like the bank example a lot, although we have a couple of different examples. So think about a bank. The customers interact most often with the lowest paid employee at a bank.
You're right.
That's the teller. That is the most common interface. Now, they'll see the loan officer some other times, and they'll see their mortgage loan officer when they need a home loan. But
once every 30 years?
Yeah, they most often, 10 actually, but they'll most often interact with that lowest paid employee. Mm-hmm. If you've got a good corporate culture and everybody knows what corporate culture means and feels like, you will want to go back to that bank over and over again because those people are happy and they're excited and they're energized. They get happy and excited and energized when they feel engaged and they don't have bosses and they have leaders.
Right.
That is the number one sales tool. And it's overlooked. People think that marketing materials are the sales tool. No, that person's energy is the sales tool.
Yeah.
That's that relationship that you're building. We talk about relationships in our companies and our products and our services, and we promise it in our marketing materials.
Right.
But every consumer knows, and it's becoming vitally important, that they know the difference between whether or not you're selling me a bag of goods or not, right? Mm-hmm, it's like we know it's different when we get there and we interact with that lowest paid employee. If the lowest paid employee is energized and on point, then you know you've got a great organization.
Yeah.
You've done it right.
Yes.
And so we like to build those materials. We work on the inside, that internal culture. We'll do things like, with one client, they had a sheet. This is the HR department. They had this sheet of values that they wanted employees to adhere to if they wanted to become leaders in the company.
Right.
And it was a list of about 24 points, and they called it expectations. Mm-hmm. I don't like the word expectations so much, but we can get into that at some other point. When we were tasked with rewriting this document, we turned it into a leadership guide based on like a field guide. Remember the old Boy Scout field guide that you would get? Yeah. And it has a little illustrations with how to tie a knot and how to identify poison ivy. And so we took those 24 bullet points. We added inspirational quotes. We fleshed out, here's how to do that on a day-to-day basis. Then at the end, we added some tools about how to have difficult conversations, and we're adding all these other handy tools. And it's a guide that's interactive. They're invited to doodle in it and draw in it. And you're invited to take 1 point a week and work on that one aspect. And by the time you get to the end of the guide, you'll be a better leader just naturally.
Yeah.
But you'll be inspired to do it. And that's the difference between a boss who says, I expect these values from you.
Right.
If you want to be a leader, and a true leader who says, hey, I want you to grow. And here's
cultivating it.
Yeah. Here's a tool for success.
That's right.
So you can build materials on the inside. Now that converts to the outside when that person is talking to a client. Every single time they pick up the phone, when you're buying something from an organization or a company, that's your best sales pitch, right?
Right.
So that becomes your external marketing. But the other part about it is when we build marketing messages that an organization wants to project, we can genuinely talk about the passion of their people because they're going to deliver on that. And so how many times have you heard external messages saying, yeah, we've got the best people, but it really wasn't the best people, right?
Right.
And so what happens is when you build that internal culture that is engaging and you can identify the key points that make that internal culture work, then you can build external marketing platforms that truly reflect what's going on. And that's what we call internal and external alignment. And so we can build marketing materials now that have a true reflection of what's going on. And every time a customer interacts with that company, they feel like a promise has been made and a promise has been delivered.
You ever made a purchase of maybe an expensive item and you received this high-end welcome package in the mail, surprisingly? And you open it and you just, wow, this is awesome. It's just a nice welcome pack. I really feel engaged with this organization.
Well, so what you're identifying is the difference between marketing and branding. And so we actually have a video on our website. It was like
and actually I saw it. So let's kind of describe it. And I'm going to recommend, in fact, let's just give it right now. Kelly, give us the website address just so we have it. And we're going to give it again, and you'll be able to find that information on the show.
Sure. It's kjresources.com.
KJ Resources. Kelly, very, very easy. Kelly and Jeremy, can't forget that. So kjresources.com. I mean, it doesn't get, that's a good domain, by the way.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, good domain name. So you can definitely see the video there, which is a great video. I watched it this morning. Real good information. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So Kelly and I talk about, that's why we use the word culture very often. We lean on the word culture a lot because the word brand is so often confused with marketing. And it's very difficult for our clients and a lot of other people's clients to tell the difference. Like, how do you tell the difference between branding? And the word brand, it's just been thrown around so many times. And a lot of people don't unless you're in marketing and that's your job, you may not have an accurate idea of what the difference is. And so what I like to remind people of is that the original use of the word was brand reputation. It was the reputation of your product or service. So nothing you can do will affect your reputation except by making and delivering on promises. That's why I referred to that earlier.
Yeah.
So when you create an internal culture, that's how you change your brand. So if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, we're gonna do some branding for you," and what they really mean is a marketing campaign, that's not branding. Branding is that film strip that plays in somebody's mind when you mention your name.
Yeah.
Right. And so human beings, we all have a brand. It's called our reputation. And so I like to remind clients, your brand is your reputation with people. And that's nowhere even close to your marketing. Your marketing is always going to promise that you're great.
And where does your reputation start within organizations? Back to your people.
Back to your people. That's when I like to say precisely promising. So when your people promise something and then they deliver each time, that builds your reputation. And so all you need to do is, if you want to figure out if somebody talking to you means the word brand or if what they're really talking about is marketing, just swap the word brand with reputation and you'll be able to tell the difference.
Right. That's a good tie. Kelly?
And one thing I would like to point out is a lot of times when Jeremy and I talk about these concepts, people say, well, that sounds expensive, or I don't know that my business could afford what you're talking about. I don't have time for that kind of stuff. And one thing I do want to talk about is we work mostly with small businesses. And the way that these ideas came about is helping small businesses to differentiate themselves from big businesses who have big budgets to go out and recruit the best and throw large salaries at the best.
Right.
What we're working with our small businesses to do is to create a culture within their organizations that costs very little in order to attract the best away from those big salaries, because really millennials, they don't care about those big salaries. To them, what is most important is doing what they love, loving what they do, and aligning their passion with their purpose and living an integrated life. If you can provide that within your organization as a small business, you will beat out the big businesses hands down. Nothing against those big businesses, but I want to let the small businesses know how inexpensive this process can be for you.
So let's run through a scenario. I've been in business since 91, been around a while, and I have a small company. Figured I need some help internally with my organization. I'm searching for some things, and all of a sudden I come across KJ Resources. I make a call. I get Kelly or Jeremy on the line. Kelly, I'm trying to work with the culture within my organization, attract better people. How can I engage with your organization? That's what I want to know. How can I do business with you guys? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think the very first thing we do, Jeremy and I start with, is meeting with you as the client and getting to know you and your personality, your story, what drives you, what you're passionate about. We want to make sure that we're working with a business owner or an organization that's a good fit for us and a good fit, and that we're a good fit for you. So I think first of all, client alignment is most important. Once we understand what your goals are and who you are, and we determine that it is a good fit, I think the next step is learning more about your organization. And for us, that means using your organization or being the end user.
Right.
So looking maybe external and getting a feel for how you show up externally, what your clients experience. But also, one of my favorite things to do is walk around an organization without really people knowing who I am or what I do, and talk to the employees.
Right.
Ask them about how they feel about their job, get a feel for their work, and understand, I guess, what's working and not working within the organization. That is a telltale sign for me. Usually within the first hour or two, I can tell what kind of organization we're working with just by talking to the employees. And that's on a continuum. And I think once we accomplish those things of getting a feel of your organization from an external and internal standpoint, we can start to sit down and look at some overall strategies that would help support your organizational goals. Everything we do is completely customized to the client. Every client we have has different organizational goals. Our number one goal is to help you meet those goals through internal and external culture.
Okay, great. So you assess the organization, see where we are. I like the first thing you said. And you don't hear this from a lot of organizations. Everybody wants to do business, but what I like, the first thing you said is the client right for us, and are we right for the client? How many times you enter into a business relationship and only realize after the fact that, gee, we don't even have alignment. It's not going to work. I respect the fact that the client has to be right for you, and you have to be right for them. And that right there, folks, gives you a ton of information about how good of an organization you guys are, because when you set that bar right off the bat, then I know that you're coming in the best interest of the organization. And I'm sure you've walked away from companies that you've said, hey, this isn't a good fit.
We have. Unfortunately, we aren't a good fit for every organization, but there are other people out there who are. So if we do walk away, we always try to recommend someone else who does maybe another way we do business, or maybe someone else who's a better fit for the organization's goal. And
I tell you what, that'll probably earn you more business down the road. And I've done that too. I've met with companies and said, you know what? Your organization is not in a place where we can really effectively help you. But here's where you might be able to go. And I can tell you those organizations have called me back or have referred me, and I've never even done business with them, but they referred me. So what a great way you guys are conducting yourselves in the workplace. So we are right on time. We usually try to have about a 30-minute show. You guys have covered some new ground, I think, for a lot of companies, introducing first, we all know that there's a culture shift, with the millennial impact in organizations, but it's really trying to get a handle on I love the internal, external marketing and branding within the organization. So in closing, I'll give you guys each some time.
I would say, if I would leave anybody with any impression, it would be that culture matters, and it's going to matter even more as time goes on and as millennial culture takes over more of our economics.
Right.
And we won't be able to separate those two. So the future of your external marketing success is going to depend on how it aligns with your internal culture and how customers, your clients, can feel that passion and that energy every time they interact with the organization.
Yeah. Good point. Kelly?
This is for the HR people, the HR listeners out there. I've been in HR for about 15 years, and when I first started, my HR path was a very traditional one. Mm-hmm. It's only in the last 7 to 8 years that I've taken a more non-traditional path, and it has invigorated me in terms of being passionate about what I do and how I help organizations to reach that next level. So I want to challenge all the HR listeners out there to look at how you can do it differently. Find ways that it's never been done before. Get out of your box. Go to the marketing department and sit down with your marketing people and talk about ways to do it differently. Brainstorm, challenge the people on your HR team to think outside of the box. Go to Pinterest and look at ideas.
Right.
Look at other things that are going on in your community for ideas. Mm-hmm. Reach out to a niece of yours who is a millennial and have some conversations with her. Just start to think differently, and I think that's what the punk rock HR is all about.
Yeah.
It's doing it differently.
Well, there you have it. We're so glad to have you guys on Higher Up, a podcast devoted to everything human resources and taking your organization to a higher level. We want to help rock HR and make HR fun, right? Fun and cool, and that's really the bottom line. So again, thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure having you. We look forward to having you again in the studio, and you guys have a safe drive. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Higher Up with John Beck.
For show notes, updates, and more on how to break the code to unlocking occupational DNA,
Join the community at hrhigherup.com.
and take your business to a higher level. This has been an exclusive production of SharperTalkMedia.com. Join the community.